And I want to go to our panelist who's joining us virtually, Simpiwe. We've heard some talk from Bobby highlighting the advertising space. We've heard some talk from Nick, and highlighting some of the implications for animation. And I think there needs to be a distinction as well with understanding that documentaries also sit in their own unique space. And I want to find out from you, Simpiwe, how do you envision how we begin to then build a sustainable business model that works for documentary films?
I think that's exactly the challenge, really. I mean, to come up with a business model that works for, for documentary films. For a long time, documentaries have been actually be seen as the poor cousins of the fiction category. And in as much as we find it much easier to actually access funding from government bodies for documentaries, but we find that actually documentaries are measured on the same standard as a fiction films, which is not the case. When you apply for development funding, the expectations that you would actually have a structured documentary by then, whereas by the nature of documentaries regress. As you develop it, new voices come into being, and you spend more time in researching your subject. So there's quite a challenge in coming up with a real, sustainable business model, especially in an environment where you find, that we actually have a dysfunctional kind of public broadcaster, where at this stage we actually don't even have a prominent kind of strand where we can say we find documentaries. So if we actually have to watch documentaries in South Africa, you probably have to go to streaming kind of platforms rather than from your public broadcaster. So to really come up with a sustainable model, we would actually need platforms that will know that there's some guarantee that the content that is actually being produced by documentary filmmakers can be seen by people. And so looking at also the kind of the legislative environment from a copyright perspective. The general feeling from documentary filmmakers is that we are actually quite excited about some changes that can be proposed, especially whereby we can actually borrow some works from other filmmakers and use them in creating new works of documentaries. And obviously works where everybody agrees that a reasonable kind of use of other people's sources should actually be encouraged, and then new content actually is created. But we also, see that documentaries become an easier kind of way for emerging filmmakers. It's less risky. If you look at it from a cost perspective, yes, we do find very expensive documentaries that are done over a long period of time. But the reality is that you are able to actually make small kind of documentaries, which makes it easier for emerging filmmakers to really practice their craft and be able to perfect it. And also bring diversity of voices. We heard in the earlier panel that about 65% of the working force actually is youth. And where do youth really find that space to express their craft? When actually, if you go for a feature film, there's 101 requirements that are needed from you in terms of your experience. And if you are really recent from a film school, where do you get that experience? And we feel that the platform is actually quite ripe for emerging filmmakers in the documentary space. And perhaps also touching on developing our craft from a human resources perspective, we could actually see things made a bit easier also from a SETA perspective for small production companies to be able to host interns into their productions. And we know that in other sectors, that is actually done quite easily. But for a small company to really host an intern, they have to, fill 101 kind of application forms for them to be able to really be supported by SETA to be paying for the intern there. So at the moment, as we're dealing with the kind of developmental kind of space, so there needs to be some relaxation and understanding of the capacity that exists within documentary filmmaker space, because those normally are not very big kind of organizations. And also, there's been this kind of notion where documentaries have been painted with the same brush that, they are all about protest, they're all about, bringing authorities, to account. Yes, that is great, to do, but also we need to be seen to be producing celebratory kind of documentaries, which may not actually have any dramatic moments, as it is expected mostly by funders, but really reflecting on the beauty of our culture. And those tend to be actually sidelined, at the expense of those, dramatic documentaries. And that's the space that we really need to look at in making sure that we actually have a number of documentaries on our platforms. And perhaps, lastly, it's about also the space now open by the big organizations, to invite documentaries to be put in there. But with those big players, again, it feels like, the emerging filmmakers are always kind of, subjected to the same kind of standards whereby they're unable to really make deals, at least, as equal partners with those platforms in negotiating, the right kind of revenue for the documentaries that they spend their time making.
Yeah, thank you so much, Simpiwe, for all those fantastic points.